winning blueprint presents.
Playoffs? Don't talk about playoffs. You kidding me? Playoffs? I just hope we can win a game.
Welcome, you are in the lab room. I'm your host, Luke. Thank you for joining me. It's Tuesday. Feeling a little bit better today. Been really medicating myself, trying to eliminate any sign of a cold that's trying to enter my body. So, feeling a little bit better today. Yesterday, I was congested, very spitty. I had a lot of spit in my mouth when I was trying to talk, but feel a lot better today. And let's get to a lot of the Super Bowl hoopla, because I think for the rest of this week, a lot of the topic of conversation is going to be dominated by those two Super Bowl teams, because let's face it, they earned the right to dominate the topic of discussion. They've outlasted 30 other teams in the National Football League. They've gotten to this point, and now they deserve the spotlight. So really, for the rest of the week, we'll be talking a lot of Ravens. We'll be talking a lot of San Francisco 49ers and everything that entails these two teams, all the stuff that really isn't football related, all the things that are leading up to the game, and then we'll get into our prognostication, our picks, who we think will win the game later on in the week. But we're just going to talk about everything 49ers and Ravens related. But before we get to that today, I want to touch on a little bit of news out of Green Bay. Greg Jennings has put his Green Bay home up for sale. Not a surprise. As we all know, he's going to hit the free agent market. I don't think the Green Bay Packers are going to offer him a deal. I just don't think that with the emergence of Randall Cobb, I think his services are no longer necessary in Green Bay. I really thought that Randall Cobb was going to be a very good slot receiver for the Green Bay Packers. I was wrong. Randall Cobb stepped up and showed that he can play out wide and he could be a huge target for Aaron Rodgers. And it's funny how injuries work in the National Football League, because 1 minute you're a guy that this offense can't function without. The next, you're just another piece, another cog in the machine, instead of being the engine that drives that machine. And so it's funny because Greg Jennings was a receiver that Aaron Rodgers really needed to flourish just 2 seasons ago. He gets hurt this year. So does Jordy Nelson. Enter Randall Cobb, and he's taken off from there. He's Mr. Do-It-All. He's a punt return, kickoff return. He's a threat out of the backfield to run it, catch it out of the backfield. He even throws passes too. I mean, he used to be a quarterback in college. A lot of people forget that. So he's a jack of all trades, but really his impact was most felt this season at the receiver position, where he was just stellar for the Green Bay Packers. And so now Greg Jennings has become expendable. And so he's no longer going to be a Green Bay Packer. That's a foregone conclusion. So him putting his house up for sale, not a huge surprise to me. All it is another indication that he is definitely on his way out of Green Bay. And he will be one of the huge catches, one of the huge fish in free agency, one of those guys that a lot of teams will be coveting, trying to get his services to their football clubs, because Greg Jennings is, without a doubt, a number 1 receiver in the National Football League, and he can get it done. And if he's on the right team, he could help someone's offense really blossom. And so be on the lookout for Greg Jennings this offseason as a free agent, because he's going to command a lot of attention, much like Vincent Jackson on the free agent market a season ago. So Media Day begins in the National Football League for the Super Bowl participants. Media Day is when basically all the players get their little booth, have media members come up, in drones and ask them questions, rapid fire. They talk for about an hour or two. And so they call it Media Day because that's when all the media members get to fire away and ask all the questions, even the dumb ones that they have in store for these players. And so I'll get to some of the responses of some of the players in a second. I think some of them were very interesting and telling. But first, let's get to a little bit of something that I thought about yesterday as we were talking about Alex Smith. I probably should have addressed it yesterday on the show, but it really didn't dawn on me until after the show was over, until its completion, when I said, you know what? I really want to talk about that because it reminds me a lot of a different situation. Doesn't this situation with Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick remind you of Tom Brady and Drew Bledsoe? Doesn't this one kind of remind you of a similar situation? Drew Bledsoe goes down after a vicious hit from Mo Lewis on the sidelines. Enter Tom Brady, who comes in, gets it done, takes them to the postseason. Bledsoe is healthy enough to play in the postseason, but they stick with Brady. Brady goes down in the playoffs. Bledsoe helps them win a game to get them to the Super Bowl. Brady starts the Super Bowl, gets it done, and the rest is history. Brady is Tom Brady. Drew Bledsoe moves on the next season to Buffalo, and their careers go in separate directions. Doesn't this story seem like it has the makings of everything that happened with Tom Brady and Drew Bledsoe? I mean, Alex Smith goes down with a concussion, misses a game. Colin Kaepernick steps in. The offense looks like it has limitless potential. Harbaugh decides, hey, the offense with Colin Kaepernick really is dynamic and hard to stop and can score 35 points in the blink of an eye versus the offense with Alex Smith under the center, which has a limit and has limitations. Let's just stick with the young fella and see where it takes us. He's the future anyway. And so Alex Smith doesn't get his spot back, much like Drew Bledsoe. Tom Brady takes his team to the Super Bowl, much like Colin Kaepernick. Now, we don't know how the Colin Kaepernick narrative ends yet. We know the Tom Brady one ends like this. We don't know how the Colin Kaepernick narrative ends, however, yet. We don't know how that story winds up ending. So we have to stay tuned for that, of course. But either way, whether they win or they lose, Alex Smith already says, I want out, which is what Drew Bledsoe basically said in New England. They granted him his wish. He went on to Buffalo. I'm assuming Alex Smith will do much of the same. He will move on and he will play for another team and probably start next season. And so, doesn't this remind you of that Patriots situation in 2001? Seems like it to me. Seems just like that scenario to me. But again, it's so fickle because anything can happen. You just don't know. The 49ers may say to Alex Smith, hey, we really value you as a backup. You're not going anywhere. Who knows? We don't know if the 49ers are going to play hardball and say, hey, you've been a great mentor to Colin Kaepernick. We like you on this roster. We don't want to give you away. Your value to us is too great to just let you walk. You have to stay here and be a backup, just in case Colin Kaepernick goes down. We don't know how this story ends. That's why I said you don't know if it'll end up that way, but it just seems like the story is going to end so much like that Tom Brady and Drew Bledsoe scenario. It just seems so much alike. And I thought I wanted to share that because it was on my brain after yesterday's episode when we were talking about Alex Smith and him wanting a release. And so let's get to press row. So let's get to the players as they sit down, and we'll focus on the 49ers today as they had their media day. And we'll talk a lot about what some of the 49ers players had to say, pull out some interesting quotes from some of the players in a segment that I'm going to call for this week, Out of Press Row. Mics up. So first I want to start with Randy Moss. Good old Randy Moss. Man, growing up, watching Randy Moss was a pleasure. I mean, We coined a term after him. You got mossed on. You mossed on somebody that meant you caught the football all over someone. You might have had them draped all over your arm or your shoulder, or they might have been trying to jump with you, and you might have leaped up over them and snatched the ball out of there. You just got mossed on. We named it after Randy Moss. I mean, the guy was an athletic freak coming into the National Football League in 1998. Now, he made some comments today that they didn't send shockwaves through the National Football League or anything like that, but they're just interesting comments from a guy who doesn't really like talking to the media and doesn't really say a lot. There's not a lot of things that Randy Moss has to say to the media. He just isn't a big fan of the media, doesn't like talking to them, and so you don't really get a lot of quotes from him. But Randy Moss today said, hey, after having time to really sit down and he was being introspective. I'm an older guy now, and I've really had a chance to reflect on my career, and I feel like I'm the greatest to ever do this. Wide receiver, that is, if you didn't understand the quote. I'm the best to do this, play wide receiver in the National Football League. Of course, the consensus is Jerry Rice is, always will be, the best to ever play wide receiver in the National Football League. He might be the single greatest player to ever play football, period. Any position. Jerry Rice, that is. And so, don't know if Randy Moss has much to that claim. I don't know if there's much merit to it, but I will say this in Randy Moss's defense. The greatest rookie season these eyes have ever seen belongs to Randy Moss. The greatest single touchdown receiving season these eyes have ever seen belongs to Randy Moss. The biggest impact on defenses and what you have to do to try to stop a receiver belongs to Randy Moss. Now, Jerry Rice, when he heard and got wind of what Randy Moss said, simply put, he said, put my numbers up against his. That was it. I mean, and that's all Jerry Rice needs to say to anyone. He doesn't need to get into a back and forth arguing match about who's better. Look at my numbers. Look at whoever else wants to claim they're the best. Come back and talk to me. Tell me what you find. It's never going to be a competition. No one's going to play 20 years in the National Football League at receiver again. I don't think that's going to ever happen again. That was something that Jerry Rice was able to accomplish. No one's going to play with the level of quarterbacks that Jerry Rice played with throughout his career. Jerry Rice went from Joe Montana to Steve Young to Rich Gannon. And no one's going to do that again. You look at the quarterbacks Randy Moss has played with, it's not even close. And that's why you have to give Randy Moss some credit where it's due. He played with Randall Cunningham. He played with Jeff George. He played with Brad Johnson. He played with Jamarcus Russell. I mean, look at some of these quarterbacks that Randy Moss played with. I mean, they weren't that good. And so, none of these quarterbacks had stellar careers. Some of them had some okay careers. You know, Randall Cunningham, Brad Johnson, they had solid careers in the National Football League. Dante Culpepper had a solid career in the National Football League. But their careers pale in comparison to all of those quarterbacks that Jerry Rice played with. Now, Randy Moss had a cup of tea with Tom Brady. You saw what he was able to do when he got that cup of tea. But make no mistake about it. Jerry Rice is the greatest receiver ever. Hands down, there's no discussion. But Randy Moss, in his era, in his time, redefined the receiver position as we knew it. And so, there's no doubt he's a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt that he's one of the best to ever do it. But no, he's not the greatest. That still is reserved for Jerry Rice. But I tell you what, Randy Moss, if you got to watch him in his prime, you were treated to some excellent football. And I tell you what, no one was more dangerous on the football field at the receiver position than Randy Moss when he played in his prime. Now look, Jerry Rice was a technician. You know, if that route called for Jerry to run 12 back to 10, it was going to be 12 back to 10. When they called a slant route, Jerry ran it better than anyone else. He stuck that foot in the ground, and once he turned around and that ball was there, he catch it and accelerate like no one else. How many times have you seen Jerry Rice catch a slant, split the corner and a linebacker, beat the safety, and score a touchdown? So much for that 4.5 40 speed that he ran at the combine. Because when he got on the field and he caught that football, Jerry Rice was running a 4.3 40. Who caught Jerry Rice from behind? Not many guys can say it. In his prime, caught Jerry Rice from behind. So Jerry Rice is, without a doubt, the best to ever do it. But make no mistake about it, Randy Moss definitely can hold his own in the discussion of some of the best receivers to ever play in the National Football League. Now, another interesting comment that I found, and two really, and we'll get to them individually, happens to surround themselves around Colin Kaepernick. Now, he didn't make the comments, but he's the centerpiece of both of these comments. We'll get to Crabtree's first, and then we'll talk about the other comment made by another San Francisco 49er player here in a second. Let's start with Michael Crabtree, though. He said, look, Colin Kaepernick is unveiling my talents. I find that to be one of the most accurate statements of the day. Because who was Michael Crabtree until Colin Kaepernick got under center? He was an early first-round draft pick of the San Francisco 49ers that really had been underachieving since he entered the league. You've been waiting for him to show flashes of the guy that they drafted out of Texas Tech. You really haven't seen it. Everything was short. Everything was elementary. It was an out. It was a stop. It was a hitch. It was a slant. It wasn't anything vertically pushing the ball down the field and allowing him to use his talents. You know, his really big and strong hands and really ability to separate from defenders down the field. Make tough catches in traffic. We haven't seen any of that from Crabtree since he entered the National Football League. And when we have, it's been rare, few, and far between. Since Colin Kaepernick has come in, you can tell that there's a chemistry there that didn't exist with Alex Smith and Michael Crabtree. He's looking for Michael Crabtree above anyone else on the field. He's finding him, he's forcing him the football, and Crabtree is responding by catching everything that's coming in his direction. And that's the receiver that they drafted with that pick. That's the receiver that felt slighted that Darius Hayward-Bay went before him to the Oakland Raiders. That's the receiver that everyone thought could get it done in the National Football League out of Texas Tech. I watched Crabtree extensively in college. He was a stud. He was a playmaker. He had Texas Tech, along with Graham Harrell, on the map. Now he's showing what he can do in the league, and it's all because of Colin Kaepernick. Look, that strong arm that Colin Kaepernick has, he's zooming it in there. You got to have some strong hands to catch that football because it's coming out with a lot of sauce on it. Michael Crabtree is corralling that football. He's snatching it out of the air. And a lot of that goes back to Crabtree having strong hands. And he's displaying all of his talents. You're seeing the ability to catch the football, pluck it out of the air. That's number one. You're seeing the ability to separate from defenders. You're seeing the ability to make tough catches in traffic. You're seeing the ability to catch it and make something happen thereafter, something that we haven't seen a lot of from Crabtree. Maybe that's the one thing we've seen the most of out of all of those things I just named under Alex Smith was the ability to catch it and make something happen thereafter because everything was short. So he had to make something happen thereafter because he wasn't catching 30-yard passes down the field. He was catching a 7-yard slant. He was catching a 5-yard out. He was catching a hitch at the line of scrimmage and then having to make someone miss to get his yardage. This year with Colin Kaepernick, he's catching the ball 17, 20 yards down the field, making a guy miss and running in the end zone. He's making plays. You're seeing Michael Crabtree grow up right before our very eyes. And it's good to see. It's very refreshing because I knew that he could do this, but I wasn't sure he was ever going to blossom into the receiver that I thought he could be because I didn't know if the quarterback exists to get him the football. So I said all of that. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, Vernon Davis says, hey, I have chemistry with Colin Kaepernick. The mere fact that he had to make that statement lets you know that the chemistry isn't the same between him and Alex Smith and him and Colin Kaepernick. the chemistry between Vernon Davis and Colin Kaepernick isn't the same as Michael Crabtree and Colin Kaepernick. Those two are on the same page. Vernon Davis and Colin Kaepernick have a long way to go. And it all started with Vernon Davis not really embracing the move and change in quarterbacks. He wanted Alex Smith to be the quarterback. He was very vocal, one of the first people to speak out about it, one of the last to really change over and say, hey, this is our quarterback and we're going to move on with Colin Kaepernick moving forward. And so it's a big deal. Since Colin Kaepernick has taken over, Vernon Davis has not seen the football that often. In fact, I would argue that Michael Crabtree and Delanie Walker are seeing the football far more than Vernon Davis is. It's not even close in my estimation. You watch a San Francisco 49ers game, Vernon Davis is not getting targeted as much as a Delanie Walker or a Michael Crabtree. And it's no coincidence. Colin Kaepernick is throwing to people that he's comfortable with. Who was his tight end that he threw to in practice? He wasn't throwing to Vernon Davis. Vernon Davis was a starter who was being thrown to by Alex Smith. So when he was getting reps, he was throwing the football to, yeah, you guessed it, Delanie Walker. So he's comfortable with throwing the football to Delanie Walker. Crabtree, he just has chemistry with Crabtree, does Colin Kaepernick. Now, Vernon Davis is lagging behind slightly, and that's pretty much the reason why he wanted Alex Smith to stay the quarterback, because he knew he was going to be fed the football with Alex Smith on the field, because Alex Smith's security blanket, his favorite target, was Vernon Davis. All else fails, throw it to Vernon. I'm going down the field 30 yards, I'm throwing it to Vernon. I need a play to be made, I'm throwing it to Vernon. It's 3rd and 6, I'm throwing it to Vernon. That was Alex Smith's frame of mind. Colin Kaepernick, on the other hand, throw it to Crabtree, throw it to Delanie Walker, and if all else fails, run. And then, if I need to, I'll throw it to someone else. But that's the order that it goes in for Colin Kaepernick right now. Throw it to Michael Crabtree, throw it to Delanie Walker, run, and then if all of those fail, or if I decide I don't want to run this time, I want to throw it, and those two options have been taken away, then I'll look for Vernon Davis. Then I'll look for Frank Gore out of the backfield. Then I'll look for LaMichael James out of the backfield. Then I'll look for someone else to throw the football to. But for the most part, his guys are Delanie Walker and Michael Crabtree, and Vernon Davis has not been flourishing in this offense since Colin Kaepernick took over. And yeah, it has to get to him. Vernon Davis is a very proud tight end in the league, has a huge ego. As most NFL players do, he wants the football. He wants to help his team win. He wants to make plays. He was able to step up against the Falcons. I felt good for him because it kind of got him back into the flow of the offense against the Falcons. He needed that kind of performance, did Vernon Davis, to feel like he was part of this offense again. And so now this team can go forward knowing that everyone's being involved in the offense. Not as much as Michael Crabtree is, but Vernon Davis will get his share of throws. I told you, I talked about this about a month ago on the program. Randy Moss had to calm Vernon Davis down because he was upset. Colin Kaepernick overthrew him on a play, and he wasn't looking for him. And he wanted the football. He wanted to make a play against the Patriots. But Colin Kaepernick was going to Michael Crabtree. He was going to Delanie Walker, not Vernon Davis, and Vernon Davis was getting upset. And you can see it. You see it bubbling on the sideline. And so those comments I thought were very interesting by Michael Crabtree, because it's the honest-to-God truth. He is starting to really show the whole league what he can really do, what he really has in his arsenal since Colin Kaepernick has taken over as a quarterback. Meanwhile, Vernon Davis is trying to convince anyone that will listen that he is in sync with Colin Kaepernick, and that remains to be seen. We haven't seen a lot of these two hooking up and having success like Alex Smith and Vernon Davis did. So, yeah, it's some validity to both of these statements. But if you read between the lines and look a little bit deeper, you'll see the real meanings behind both of these statements by these two players. So, that's the touchdown. Go ahead and throw it up. I'm going to tack on this quick extra point. Now, Couple of reminders on some programs coming up. Again, lab follow-up today, Pittsburgh Steelers. Stay tuned for that. Also want to keep you abreast of what's going on in terms of free agency. We're going to get to that soon as the season is over and we wrap up the Super Bowl, put a bow on that, and kind of really make sure that's on the back burner. We're going to jump right into draft and free agency talk. So stay tuned for that as well. Tomorrow on the program, I think I'm going to have a little flashback to some Soul Survivor talk because these two teams are really survivors. We started with 32 teams. We're down to 2. They outlasted 30 other teams. And so now it comes down to this one game to decide who the sole survivor will be. So I think tomorrow, as we used to do on Wednesdays, we'll go back into the time machine and do a little bit of soul surviving tomorrow. I think that's only fitting for the final week of the NFL season to cap it off the right way. So looking forward to doing that tomorrow. Thank you for joining me in the lab room today. It's been fun. Got to a lot. Tomorrow we'll probably be talking a lot more about the Ravens as we spent a lot of time on the 49ers today. So looking forward to doing that tomorrow. Again, stay tuned for the lab follow-up today. We'll be talking Pittsburgh Steelers football. So stay tuned for that. I thank you for joining me. There's many ways to view and contact the show. As you know, there's Facebook. In the lab room is the Facebook page. There's YouTube. Louis T is the page. Subscribe to it. There's Twitter. At In the Lab Room is the Twitter handle. There's the inbox. In the Lab Room at gmail.com is the inbox. Any one of those will get you direct access to me or the show. And I thank you for joining me. As always, take care of yourself. Want to see you back here, same time, same place. And as always, have a good one. Stay tuned for the lab follow-up, and I'll see you here in the lab room tomorrow. Have a good one.